Hello, and welcome to another episode of Spiritual Vampires, where we focus on spiritual leaders of all faiths who willingly harm or take advantage of their followers. This video will cover the rise and fall of Stovall Weems, who was previously the lead pastor at Celebration Church in Jacksonville, Florida. While I will briefly mention his wife Carrie Weems throughout this video, the primary focus will be on Stovall Weems and his alleged behavior. I will utilize various news reports from before and after the alleged events took place, as well as the investigative report released by the church itself. This report purports to contain an extensive analysis of thousands of pages of documents, as well as interviews with more than 20 current and former employees of the church, which include members of senior leadership, staff, and trustees, as well as advisors and consultants. I will, of course, include a link to this report in the description box below, as well as all the other sources I have utilized for this video. Before we dive into Stovall's history, I must give a couple of brief disclaimers. First, Stovall Weems' financial activities involve not one, but two different residential properties. Although addresses for each property are in the public record, I will not be disclosing them in this video, but will instead be using intentionally vague descriptors. Also, no criminal charges have actually been brought against Stovall Weems or his wife. As I do not wish to be sued or have this video taken down, I will be using the word allegedly a lot when I mention the information sourced from the church's investigative report. Finally, the legal definition of fair use allows for otherwise copyrighted materials to be utilized for the purposes of research, commentary, and criticism, which are the intended purposes of this video. With all that being said, let's begin. Stovall Weems, first name Charles, was the son of a lawyer and a teaching assistant. While Stovall later claimed he had not grown up in the church, his mother had taught Bible studies throughout his childhood. As a young adult, Weems attended college at Louisiana State, the same college his father had attended. According to Weems himself, his turn to Christ had started years earlier at a youth camp when several people had prayed over him. Initially, while working as a bouncer, he had tried to bring fellow students to Christ, but then later felt called to abandon that scene entirely and show his faith with regular fasting and prayer. In the fall of 1998, after much prayer and counsel from his church leadership in Baton Rouge, Weems, Carrie, and their baby daughter moved to Jacksonville to plant an evangelical church with a group of only 7 people. Shortly afterward, Celebration Church was born. Under the supervision of senior church leaders, Celebration Church grew from a small, tight-knit community of employees and volunteers into a fully fledged church with thousands of active members. In 2009, Stovall started a 3-week-long regimen of fasting and prayer at Celebration Church called Awakening, which became a recurring event each year. Stovall Weems' first book provided details of this fasting regimen and was released in December 2010. In an interview with Charisma magazine in 2011, Weems described his early ministry as being driven by a zeal for reaching people, no matter how quote-unquote lost they were. In 2014 and 2015, Weems released 2 more books called The God First Life and Living the God First Life, respectively. By that time, Celebration Church had facilitated numerous missions overseas, started numerous spin-off entities that provided support services for the congregation. At its height, Stovall Weems Ministries broadcasted to over 90 million homes domestically and over 200 countries around the world. The so-called encounter, as it is later called in Celebration Church's investigative report and by Weems himself, was allegedly a turning point for the way Weems chose to run the church. While attending a reenactment of the ancient Judaic Passover supper held at Celebration Church on Easter of 2018, Participants described Weems staring blankly at a piece of bread that he was holding for a long time. After the Passover supper, he appeared bewildered, stunned, and speechless as his attention turned back to the events on stage.
When Paul began to say that blessing in Hebrew over the bread, I heard another Hebrew voice. It was not Paul's voice. It was like going from mono to stereo. It was deep, it was full, it was penetrating. It was another Hebrew voice. And that kind of started this chain reaction of this powerful encounter that I had with the Lord. And then I felt the presence of Jesus. Now, I know the whole, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Shema, one God, three persons. But this was the presence of Jesus that also was the personality. I just turned my head. I had to look. And that's when I saw the Lord standing on the stage. My feet were on that stage. My physical body was there on that stage, but I was in the heavenly realm with Jesus.
In the days after the vision, Stovall Weems was described in the church's investigative report as visibly shaking and sobbing. Carrie Weems was also described as being visibly distraught over the state her husband was in. Despite being so affected, neither Stovall nor Carrie took any meaningful time off, according to the church's report. Stovall then allegedly began to use the encounter to justify increasing his authority and control over the church. The justification he allegedly gave was straightforward, as he had been the only person to receive a vision from God. Only he could interpret the meaning of it, and only he could decide what direction to take the church. Weems had allegedly begun to put unreasonable demands on church staff. According to the church's investigative report, one former employee reported she had to beg for an hour each day in which she was not required to immediately respond to Stovall's text messages. Another witness reported that Weems instructed an employee to drive to a liquor store late at night and deliver a bottle of bourbon to the Weems' house because Weems allegedly did not want to be seen purchasing liquor. A third witness recounted how an employee was allegedly instructed to purchase a car for Weems and deliver it directly to his house. After the employee delivered the car, Weems allegedly told the employee to find his own way home. In 2020, Weems allegedly drafted a document instructing assistants on how they were to perform upkeep on each of the Weems' 3 residences. This was allegedly done so the Weems' would always be able to focus on their quote-unquote spiritual acuity without having to be bothered by little annoyances like housework. Staff were allegedly not permitted to question or challenge Weems for fear of reprimand or worse. According to the church's investigative report, shunning, isolating, and discarding were common tactics used to punish anyone employed by the church who expressed concern or disagreed in any way with any of the ideas presented by Weems. Allegedly, neither the role that the employees occupied nor their length of tenure with the church mattered. They were all allegedly expendable. In a church board meeting held in September of 2020, Stovall Weems allegedly presented his vision for a large restructuring plan, which included a request to seek a $14 million credit line to fund proposed real estate purchases and upgrades, but he failed to explain specific details. The board subsequently requested further clarification of Weems' proposed plans, which he did provide, but the board was not willing to give their consent. Their reason? The COVID pandemic of 2020 had caused the church's revenues to fall 15% short of projections. Additionally, the church's cash balance had dropped dramatically from $9 million to $6 million. There was clearly a strain on the church's operations and finances. Therefore, the board was less willing to take a gamble. Stovall Weems' own alleged actions appeared to put the church in an even less secure financial position. He had been receiving donations meant for the church and had allegedly directed those funds to be deposited in accounts belonging to other entities. In December 2020, Stovall Weems once again allegedly demanded the board approve the $14 million in new debt. Once again, the board questioned Weems about the specifics of his plan, and Stovall allegedly responded with frustration and indignance. Instead of providing a business case to support his plan, Weems allegedly demanded the trustees either immediately approve the plan without any further questions or end the meeting. When the trustees asked for a 5-minute break, both Stovall and Carrie Weems walked out. Lisa Stewart, the long-serving CFO of Celebration Church, resigned from her role in the last months of 2020 to work as CEO of Honey Lake Clinic. The church had an interim or temporary CFO, Devin Shanding, overseeing the church's finances from late 2020 until January 2021, which was the month that Tohi Thomas had stepped in as CFO of Celebration Church. Within that same month, Weems had allegedly directed Thomas to switch the church's accounts from BBVA, now PNC Bank, to First Citizens Bank. This decision appears to have been made without regard for potential impacts to the church's credit line, and Thomas was having none of it. Thomas had evidently found out how fast Celebration Church was burning through its cash reserves, and he was concerned, to say the least. Thomas ended up leaving his position as CFO after only 4 months. The reason he gave for leaving? Poor treatment by Stovall Weems. After Thomas's departure from the church, Weems did not fill the position of CFO again, but instead, allegedly, relied on the HR director to take on some of the responsibilities that a CFO would usually handle. By February 2021, 3 trustees of Celebration Church had resigned at the same time, citing the following as reasons for their sudden departure. 1. Financial commitments made without board authorization. 2. Overaccumulation of church debt. 3. Conflicts of interest between organizations. And 4. Lack of oversight. For nearly a 6-month period, Celebration Church did not have a board meeting at all. On January 14, 2020, Celebration Church agreed to purchase a home in the Intercoastal West area of Jacksonville that was worth over $1.2 million for Stovall and Carrie Weems to use as their personal residence. This exact same property was later sold on June 4, 2021 for over $1.4 million. Stovall had allegedly asked if he could keep the proceeds from that sale. However, he was told that he was not entitled to them, as Celebration Church had owned the property and not Mr. or Mrs. Weems. In February 2021, Stovall, through his company Weems Group LLC, had purchased another house near the Nassau River for $855,000. In June of that same year, the very same property was sold to Celebration Church for over $1.2 million, with no approval from the church's board. Despite the increase in the sales price, almost no improvements were made to the property. Between March and April of 2021, the church's cash balance had fallen even further, down to $2 million. Due to the lack of cash on hand, Celebration Church had drawn money from a line of credit with Wesleyan Investment Foundation to be able to afford the home purchase. Stovall Weems had allegedly signed off on documents for both parties. Between 2020 and 2021, Celebration Church had received 2 PPP loans in total. The stated purpose for both was to pay for church expenses like employee wages, rent, and utilities. The first loan, obtained in 2020, was used for its intended purpose. Expenditures were carefully documented by former CFO Lisa Stewart prior to her departure from the church. The application for the second PPP loan was submitted April 2021, shortly before Tohi Thomas left. Over $1.1 million was received by Celebration Church sometime after Thomas resigned. However, it appears that much of the funds were invested in a revenue-bearing digital security called Turncoin. Just to be clear, Turncoin is not a cryptocurrency. according to a private placement memorandum issued by the exchange PTE Ltd., which is the company that designed Turncoin. Quote, investment in Turncoin involves a high degree of risk and is suitable for persons who can bear the economic risk for an indefinite period of time and who can afford to lose their entire investment. Furthermore, investors must understand that this investment is illiquid and is expected to continue to be illiquid for an indefinite period of time. No public market exists for the securities, and no public market is expected to develop following this offering. End quote. $100,000 of the loan funds received from the second PPP loan were invested in Turncoin directly on behalf of Celebration Church. Over $856,000 was transferred to Honey Lake Farms' First Citizens Missions account. Out of that, $150,000 was used to buy Turncoin on behalf of Honey Lake Farms, and another $150,000 was used to buy Turncoin on behalf of AWK&G. According to Celebration Church's investigative report, Stovall Weems had intentionally bundled these funds with others so he could qualify as a legacy investor, which would make him entitled to 10% interest on his investment and would also mean that he would be paid back before other investors. An additional $100,000 was transferred to an unrelated church in Nevada, supposedly to support missions. However, the pastor of the church in Nevada later told Celebration Church staff that Stovall Weems had directed him to spend that $100,000 not on missions, but on Turncoin as part of Weems' legacy investment scheme. In August 2021, Stovall Weems applied for a loan from First Citizens Bank on behalf of Honey Lake Farms, Inc. When questioned about the validity of the financial statements provided to the bank, Stovall ordered Celebration Church's accountants to write off $1.3 million in debt from the church's books so that it could be deleted as a liability from Honey Lake Farms' financial statements. To be clear, misrepresentation of the financial statements of a business and unauthorized debt forgiveness in connection with the loan application violates Florida and federal law. Celebration Church had previously made intercompany loans for the development and operation of Honey Lake Farms. These included a loan in the amount of over $1.3 million for the construction of a lodge building at the farms. For years, this loan had been reflected as part of Celebration Church's accounts receivable balance and as part of the accounts payable balance for Honey Lake Farms. In layman's terms, this meant that Honey Lake Farms was expected to pay that loan back to Celebration Church, and Celebration Church had an expectation to receive those funds from Honey Lake Farms at some point. However, when Weems ordered those debts written off, he was essentially taking yet more money from Celebration Church's coffers, allegedly. Additionally, Celebration Church gave an advancement of 9 months' salary during 2021 to Carrie Weems, and 7 months' salary to Stovall Weems in violation of Florida statute and the church's own internal policies, despite neither Stovall nor Carrie Weems performing the duties that purportedly justified those salaries. On November 8, 2021, PNC Bank notified Celebration Church that AWK&G had missed a payment. As a result, the bank reevaluated all related accounts and reduced Celebration Church's credit line from $2 million to a mere $200,000. This put Celebration Church in serious financial jeopardy. When Celebration Church attempted to open new commercial credit cards with First Citizens, they were only willing to provide a line with a $70,000 credit limit. On April 8, 2022, PNC Bank announced it was revoking Celebration's credit line entirely, the same credit line that church employees relied on to pay regular expenses, which left the church in a cash-only position. After Celebration Church began the investigative process, the Weemses allegedly filed a civil action in state court to stop the investigation from continuing. According to the church's report, Stovall and Carey also allegedly refused to recognize the authority of the board to undertake any investigation. As Celebration Church did conclude their investigation and released the report anyway in April 2022, the same month that the Weemses were suspended and stepped down as pastors of Celebration Church. In his resignation letter, Stovall Weems claimed he and his wife would, quote, continue our ministry elsewhere, placing ourselves under the proper accountability and oversight of a council of apostolic pastors and elders in our city, end quote. Within Celebration's investigative report, the church's attorneys recommended 7 action steps, which were all approved by the board. 1. Accept the resignation of Stovall and Carrie Weems as employees of Celebration Church, effective April 15, 2022, without further compensation or benefits. 2. Pursue the removal of Stovall and Carrie Weems from any positions of authority relating to the church, including Honey Lake Farms, Honey Lake Clinic, and AWK&G. 3. Require Stovall and Carrie Weems to account for and return to the church all funds misappropriated by them. 4. Remove Stovall and Carrie Weems from the parsonage and sell the property. 5. Require North Stream Management, Habitat for Wholeness, Honey Lake Farms, and AWK&G to repay all receivables and loans made by the church to those entities. 6. Report these findings to the appropriate authorities to determine whether criminal charges should be brought. 7. Engage in the Christian conciliation process outlined in Celebration's bylaws. To date, neither Stovall nor Carrie Weems have had criminal charges of any kind brought against them, but that is not to say there hasn't been any legal fallout at all. In 2022, Stovall and Carrie Weems filed a lawsuit alleging the church and its attorneys defamed them and caused irreparable damage to their reputation from the release of the investigative report. In the suit, Stovall Weems claimed that the Board of Trustees had orchestrated a coup after Weems allegedly discovered that one trustee, Kevin Cormier, was involved in financial misconduct. Weems further alleged that the trustee had been improperly billing the church for construction-type services and then had turned the other trustees against Stovall after supposedly being confronted by Weems. Weems also claimed the internal investigative report provided by the church was a, quote, false and defamatory narrative, end quote, and has also publicly called the report, quote, completely concocted by the trustees and their lawyer as a character assassination without real basis, end quote. In the suit, Stovall Weems also stated that the Nassau River property was part of a retirement package for himself and his wife, who still assert the right to live there. The church had already served eviction notices to the Weemses, but they refused to vacate the premises. Stovall Weems claimed his entitlement to the property was based on the compensation resolution passed in 2019, before the Nassau River property was ever purchased. A church attorney filed a motion to dismiss, citing the court does not have jurisdiction to rule on ecclesiastical matters, and the defamation case was dismissed and a new case was allowed to be filed. In total, the Weemses filed 3 amended complaints before the case was dismissed with prejudice for lack of subject matter jurisdiction around the latter part of last year. Although the Weemses could have filed a notice of appeal within 30 days of dismissal, the fact that the case was dismissed with prejudice meant that the decision was pretty much final. In May 2022, First Citizens Bank and Trust filed a lawsuit against the Weemses, along with 3 of their businesses. First Citizens initially claimed it was owed a total of $716,000 by the Weemses and 3 of their businesses, Honey Lake Farms, Inc., Weems Group, LLC, and North Stream Management, LLC. A motion to dismiss was filed on behalf of the defendants in July 2022 for the initial complaint not stating a cause of action. The initial complaint apparently also did not include all attachments, including but not limited to a credit card agreement or itemized statements. A settlement was eventually reached in December 2022. A bank lawyer had filed notice at the Duval County Courthouse that First Citizens was voluntarily dismissing the suit, quote, as a result of an amicable settlement, end quote. No further details of the settlement could be found. In June of 2022, Celebration Church also filed a complaint for eviction against Stovall and Carey to remove them from the Nassau River property so the church could sell off the property. Celebration Church notified the Weemses to vacate the premises on May 31st, but they refused. Celebration Church subsequently filed a motion in the property case to determine the amount of rent the Weemses might owe on the Nassau River property. However, the Weemses filed motions to dismiss. In October 2023, there was a split ruling over the eviction case. The judge ruled on 5 cases on neutral principles of secular law, but dismissed 6 other claims with prejudice on the complaint, stating the claims are premised on the, quote, underlying power struggle between the pastors and the church board, end quote. The case appears to be ongoing. Stovall and Carey Weems also filed a federal complaint in July 2023 against one of the largest church planting organizations in the country, the Association of Related Churches, or ARC. In the complaint, the Weemses accused ARC and 3 other pastors of masterminding a conspiracy to take over the church and oust the Weemses from their roles. The reason? Because the defendants supposedly perceived the Weemses as a significant threat to their economic interests. Celebration Church is not listed as a defendant in this federal case. ARC's website describes the organization as a, quote, cooperative of independent churches from different denominations, networks, and backgrounds, who strategically resource church planters and pastors to help them reach people with the message of Jesus, end quote. They claim to do this by providing the relationships, resources, and opportunities to leaders of new and existing churches so that they can thrive. The Weemses sought over $75,000 in damages and alleged that the members of ARC, including Dino Rizzo, John Siebeling, and Chris Hodges, decided to plot a takeover of Celebration Church and its operations to frame the Weemses for financial crimes they never committed. This scheme was allegedly hatched when Stovall Weems decided back in 2018 that he would not make any donations to the ARC unless the money was going towards missionary work. It's interesting to note that 2 of the defendants in this case were actively involved in both ARC and were overseers at Celebration Church up until September 2021, according to the church's own investigative report as well as ARC's website. Since the complaint was filed, there's been plenty of back and forth between plaintiffs and defendants. An order was filed in February 2024 to either dismiss the case due to lack of jurisdiction, or, alternatively, the Weemses could file an amended complaint with a more definite statement and supporting memorandum of law. An amended complaint and demand for jury trial was apparently filed in March. Another motion to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction or failure to state a claim was filed in April, and a response was filed in May. The Weemses launched a new ministry in 2022 called Awakening Ecclesia, as well as a ministry school called Awakening Ecclesia School of Ministry. They are currently soliciting donations via the entity's website, which describes the encounter that Stovall had in 2018, as well as a vague description of the Weems' hardships. According to the website, they also have an outreach program called Acts on the Street that meets once a month in downtown Jacksonville and provides meal delivery, laundry assistance, and prayer. Going briefly back to the timeline, Rizzo and Siebeling left between the time when the loan application was submitted with First Citizens Bank and the time when the first notification was received from PNC Bank. Is it possible that these gentlemen had it out for Stovall Weems for years and had set up an elaborate hoax to boot Weems from his own church? Perhaps this was the case. However, in my mind this raises a number of questions, including whether Rizzo and Siebeling had any real control over Honey Lake Farms or other entities outside the church. Or for that matter, the other trustee, Kevin Cormier. I highly doubt that they ever had any real control or oversight over Weems Group LLC, which was the entity that purchased the Nassau River property before it was sold 4 months later for a significantly higher price to Celebration Church. While details of this purchase are provided in the church's investigative report, these details can also be corroborated independently through other public sources if one is willing to take the time to look. In my opinion, the details of that property purchase alone are enough to show Weems was trying to enrich himself at his own church's expense. Why should this matter? I believe the financial setback suffered by Celebration Church rippled out and adversely affected the congregation and staff of the church as well. Prior to his encounter, Weems, or at least the people working under him, had good intentions and had done good for others in the local community and abroad. However, all those efforts are now completely overshadowed by the activities that Weems and his wife are alleged to have perpetrated on their own church and followers. No matter their prior actions or the secret knowledge they claim to have, no man or woman should ever be above scrutiny or reproach. If you are still watching or listening to this video, I thank you kindly. Please consider giving this video a like or drop a comment below to help out the algorithm. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. This video took way longer to make than I anticipated, so I would very much appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.